commandment is, thou shalt not kill. And Lord's Day 40 expounds this commandment. What doth God require in the 6th commandment? That neither in thoughts, nor words, nor gestures, much less in deeds, I dishonour, or hate, wound, or kill my neighbour, by myself or by another, but that I lay aside all desire of revenge. Also, that I hurt not myself, nor wilfully expose myself to any danger. Wherefore also the magistrate is armed with the sword to prevent murder. This commandment seems only to speak of murder. In forbidding murder, God teaches us that He abhors the causes thereof, such as envy, hatred, anger, and desire of revenge, and that He accounts all these as murder. But is it enough that we do not kill any man in the manner mentioned above? No. For when God forbids envy, hatred, and anger, He commands us to love our neighbour as ourselves, to show patience, peace, meekness, mercy, and all kindness toward him, and prevent his hurt as much as in us lies, and that we do good, even to our enemies. With the 6th commandment, beloved, we begin the 2nd half of the Decalogue, or 10 Commandments, which 2nd half consists in general of shorter commandments. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not steal. And each of these 3 commandments consists of just 2 words in the original Hebrew. Then thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbour. That little bit, against thy neighbour, makes it a little bit longer. And then the 10th commandment, thou shalt not covet. And then a much longer bit, specifying the various things that we should not covet. But not only is the 2nd half of the Decalogue shorter in general, it also begins with the things which are most obviously most serious and most outward, and then sort of goes down a bit, if we may so speak. Thou shalt not kill. Then thou shalt not commit adultery, because obviously murdering someone is even worse than adultery. And then thou shalt not steal, because adultery is even worse than stealing. Then thou shalt not bear false witness, because stealing is worse than lying. And then thou shalt not covet, which is most obviously internal, an attitude of the heart. But perhaps a word of clarification should be added here. I have spoken of the 2nd half of the Decalogue. The 2nd half of the Decalogue should not be confused with the 2nd table of the Decalogue. The 2nd half of the Decalogue, that's a mathematical classification. It just refers to those commandments from 6 to number 10. But the 2nd table is longer. It consists of the 5th to the 10th commandments, and the 2nd table deals with our duty towards our neighbour. The 1st table, 1 to 4, deals with our duty to God. Now, the same disposition is required to keep any and all the parts of the Decalogue. The 1st table, referring to God, Numbers 1 to 4. And the 2nd table, referring to man, 5 through 6 of the 1st half of the 2nd half, and all the individual commandments, the same disposition. Gratitude. Gratitude. God has brought us out of Egypt, the bondage of sin, by the blood of the Lamb. We've been redeemed from spiritual slavery. We're on our way to the heavenly Canaan. Therefore, let us be thankful. And you say, well, he said something like that very similar last week, and maybe even the week before that. And you're right too. You're right to. Moses was at that all through the wilderness, and the prophets did the exact same thing. They reduced Israel's calling as flowing from the redemption from Egypt continuously. You've been brought out of bondage. Therefore, be grateful to that God who saved you. Worship Him alone, and love your neighbour as yourself. That's the way. You keep the 10 Commandments because you're thankful to God. And you keep now, especially this morning, this 6th commandment. Thou shalt not kill. Let's consider it under the theme, do not murder. First, we'll look at acts not forbidden in the 6th commandment. Then we'll look at the acts which are forbidden. And then we'll look at the attitudes which are forbidden. And the attitudes lie behind the sinful, forbidden acts. And at various points, I'll draw out the implication from the negative to the positive, or the positive to the negative. Do not murder. Acts not forbidden, acts forbidden, and attitudes forbidden. This commandment, thou shalt not kill, does not forbid the death penalty. And I'll prove that to you by looking at 3 texts. First of all, near the start of your Bibles, Genesis chapter 9. Genesis 9, from near the end of verse 5 and verse 6. Genesis 9, verse 5. At the hand of every man's brother will I require the life of man. Whoso sheddeth man's blood, murder, by man shall his blood be shed. Not that God's going to hit with lightning, but God calls man to take the murderer's life. For in the image of God made he man. Unlike the animals, man was made in Genesis chapter 1 in the image of God. In Genesis chapter 9 here is a word to Noah and his sons after they exited the ark. And from them has developed the whole human race. This is not some Jewish law. This is general, global commandment from God. Murderers are to be put to death. Then we move to the New Testament, Romans 13, a passage we read last week. Romans 13 verse 4 states that the magistrate, or state, middle of the verse, beareth not the sword in vain. The sword is not just the rod for beating someone on the back, but the sword is for execution, the cutting off, let's say, of the head. Then we turn to Acts 25, verse 11, Paul's personal testimony. He has been arraigned as a criminal, and he is here defending himself before Festus, and he states this: if I be an offender, or have committed anything worthy of death, I refuse not to die. If I have committed anything worthy of death, a capital offence, I do not refuse to die, and I will not object to it. Paul had in his mind a category of crimes worthy of death. He says, if I have committed any crime like that, I will die. I will yield myself willingly, because you have the right to take my life. You see, this commandment, the 6th commandment, thou shalt not kill, is literally, thou shalt not murder. The word is murder. It does not forbid the killing or the taking of life from all human beings, but it forbids unlawful killings. And unlawful killings, that's murder.